Welcome to today's webinar, Meet the Candidates for the Pacific Northwest. I'm Anne Marie Bissett, a former Washington resident and current Democrats Abroad Pacific Northwest State Team Chair, and join you from my home in Germany. Today we are spotlighting the importance of Pacific Northwest voters to drive change up and down the ballot and cast their votes for conservation, workers' rights, ranked choice voting, health insurance protections, tax reform, and more. We are honored to welcome Washington State Congresswoman Suzan DelBene, as well as first-time candidates for Idaho's 2 U.S. House seats, Kaylee Peterson and David Roth, and to hear from Alaska Congresswoman Mary Peltola, New York Congressman and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson, as well as Oregon's candidate for Secretary of State, Tobias and Alexis Rinck for the Seattle City Council at large member. And the Pacific Northwest is also a touch point for the many Americans abroad who live right over the border in Canada. We are presenting this event today in partnership with the Democrats Abroad, British Columbia Mainland, and DA Canada, and you will hear from a number of speakers within the DA organization about the importance of U.S. voters abroad in this very important election. I will now hand it over to Martha McDevitt-Pugh, the International Chair of Democrats Abroad, for some remarks and to introduce our first guest, Congresswoman Suzan DelBene.
Thank you very much, Anna Marie, and it's really a pleasure and a delight to be able to be here. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of our guests today, to our Democrats Abroad members and our Pacific Northwest voters, and to all of you who've joined from around the world. I'm Martha McDevitt-Pugh. I'm the International Chair of Democrats Abroad. I am a California voter, and I live in the Netherlands. As the Democratic State Party for U.S. citizens living around the world, we're at a very exciting moment. We're 35 days out from a critical election for president, to keep the Senate, and to win the House. And if you've already requested a ballot, you should have it by now. And if not, you should follow up. But the opportunity we have right now for all of us is to alter the course of history with our votes and with the votes of our friends and family. And it's a moment for having conversations about the kind of future that we want to have. And that's what we're going to have today. We've done it before together during a global pandemic without the ability to get out and be where people are and to connect and inform and encourage other U.S. citizens to vote. So we know that this is something that we can do. That's all on our plate as Democrats Abroad. And I'm really delighted to see all of our 46 country committees around the world engaging locally, and our global teams providing comprehensive and really excellent service to be able to assist voters around the world. And I just really love the way that all of that works together so seamlessly with our Democrats Abroad state teams who are so focused on getting out the vote back home where we vote, and building community among voters, but also making sure that we focus not just on the top of the ticket, but all the way down the ballot. And so with that, I would like to introduce our honored guest today. Suzan DelBene has represented Washington's 1st congressional district since 2012, fighting on behalf of working families in her district. And growing up, Suzan saw her parents struggle to make ends meet. Determined to secure a better future for herself, Suzan worked her way through college and earned a bachelor's degree from Reed College in Portland, Oregon, and later received a master's in business administration from the University of Washington. And after studying, Suzan became a leader in technology and innovation over a 12-year career at Microsoft. Among just a handful of women executives nationwide, she served as a vice president running the company's mobile technology business and went on to lead multiple new and emerging companies, including drugstore.com and Nimble Technology. In 2010, Congresswoman DelBene was appointed by Governor Chris Gregoire to serve as a director of the Washington State Department of Revenue during one of the most difficult budget challenges in state history. And she worked diligently to improve efficiency and save money without cutting vital funding to programs that help low-income and middle-class families. And in this role, she also traveled to states working with small businesses to cut through the red tape. Now, the congressman knows what it takes to win competitive House races. When she ran for Congress in 2012, she won a toss-up district as a red to blue candidate and went on to win re-election as a frontline candidate before eventually putting her district permanently out of the Republicans' reach. Congresswoman DelBene has served previously in key leadership roles, including finance chair of the DCCC, which when we reclaimed the House majority in 2018, and as a frontline co-chair in 2020. And right now, she's also really focused on helping us all win back the House majority. So we're very grateful to have her here today as a battle-tested former red to blue and frontline member with a sharp political instinct and proven fundraising ability. And with her leadership, Democrats are well on their way to reclaiming the House majority in 2024. So with that, I'd like to hand over to the Congresswoman.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much for inviting me to join all of you today. Thanks to Anne Marie and Jennifer as well. And to everyone who's joined us from wherever you might be. It's great to be with so many folks who call the Pacific Northwest home, and to see your engagement and involvement, because this is a critical time. As Martha said, I've represented the 1st District in Washington since 2012. I never thought I would run for Congress, but I did because I wanted to make a difference for my community. And it was a divisive time then, or I thought it was a divisive time then, but compared to where we are now, it seems kind of quaint in retrospect, given how divisive things are today. But it's like so many, I came to Congress to get things done, to make a difference for families, to make a difference for young people growing up with challenges, like my family had financial challenges, and to be in a place where there's opportunity, infinite opportunity ahead. So I have been in Congress for 12 years, but this Congress has been very important. Not only am I working hard to make sure we address issues in policy, which has been very difficult in one of the most unproductive Congresses ever, given Republican leadership, but I'm also chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC. So I am in charge of making sure that we take back the House, that Leader Jeffries becomes Speaker Jeffries next Congress, and that we have a strong partnership with our future President, Kamala Harris. It is an incredibly important time for us. I travel all across the country in our battleground districts, and folks want to see governance work. They're tired of the chaos and extremism that they've seen from the Republican side. They want to make sure that we are focused on the issues that are important to them. And there couldn't be a more stark contrast this cycle between Republicans and Democrats. Really what's at stake are our rights, our freedoms, our democracy, and our future. We have incredible candidates running all across the country. Those we call our red to blue candidates, the folks in some of the toughest races where we feel like we have an opportunity to flip districts, say that real fast. We also have our frontliners. Those are our incumbents who are running for re-election in some of the toughest races in the country. So all up, our map from the DCCC perspective is about 68 races across the country, both incumbents who are trying to make sure get reelected and candidates who are trying to flip seats. So we lost the majority in 2022 by just over 6,600 votes across the country. So when we talk about how every vote matters and how important it is to make sure that everyone casts their ballot, that shows you how close this can be. And this is absolutely another time where we're going to have a very close election. We have many districts where elections are going to be very close. I am confident, I feel strongly that we can take back the House, but only if we work and do everything we can every single day to get us across the finish line. So, but I'm happy to talk more about what's happening on the ground and to answer your questions. So let me turn it back over to Martha and let's take some questions.
I'm going to jump in with the first question, if I may. It was, again, very exciting to hear you speak at the Washington Democratic Convention this June. And can you please elaborate on the role of the Pacific Northwest in steering the direction of the country and the importance of elections up and down the ballot in our states?
Well, absolutely. Obviously, my focus has been on the House. And so first I'll say that taking back the House absolutely runs through the Northwest. And not only do we have a DCCC chair from the Northwest, which we haven't had, I don't think we've ever had before, but also we have incredible candidates running in tough districts across our region. Clearly in Alaska, you are going to hear a little bit more from Mary Peltola. Mary is running for her first reelection. She's the first Democrat to represent the state of Alaska in Congress in about 50 years. She's doing an incredible job. That is a close race, so it's important we reelect Mary. We have Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Southwest Washington, also a freshman running for reelection in a very, very much a swing district. Another critical race for us. She's been doing an incredible job in Congress, but it's so important, especially freshmen who are running for their first reelection, helping make sure they get through so they are able to, because as they continue to build support and make sure people know the great work that they're doing. We have other frontliners in the Northwest, Dr. Kim Schreier here in Washington, Andrea Salinas in Oregon, and Val Hoyle in Oregon. Both Andrea and Val, Marie and Mary are all freshman members, also all women, I should point out, who are running for reelection. So that's important. And we have the opportunity to flip a seat with Janelle Bynum running in Oregon 5, an opportunity for us to take back a seat. We only need 4 more seats to take back the majority in the House. So if we can keep the seats we have, those 5 frontliners I talked about here in the Northwest, we could also flip one in the Northwest in Oregon with Janelle and put us one step closer to being in the majority. Clearly, there is a lot of money being spent throughout our region, but we have incredible opportunities here. And these are going to be close races, but we win when people know who our candidates are and what they stand for, because people are with us.
Fabulous. Suma, you have some questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Representative DelBene. My name is Suma Shamana, and I'm the Regional Vice Chair for Asia Pacific region. And I'm an Oregon voter. I have lived in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, all through my life. And I'm here. I'm calling from my home in Bangalore, India. So I moved to India because of the tech and etc. So my question is to you, Representative DelBene, is we have seen how Democrats can fight for abortion rights and win, even among independents and Republicans. Thank you for all that you have done in Washington. As a co-sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act, with an impressive record as a pro-choice champion, we know that you will continue to do everything you can to protect abortion access for women across the United States. How will you continue to protect women's right to choose? Could you please elaborate? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, an incredibly important question. And first, this highlights again how critically important it is that we take back the majority in the House, that we elect Kamala Harris as our next president, that we keep the Senate, because as you said, we passed the Women's Health Protection Act in the House last Congress when we were in the majority. In fact, we passed it twice. But the only way we really make a difference is we get it through the House, to the Senate, and to the president's desk and sign into law to put the protections of Roe back into place. To do that, we need to make sure that we have a pro-choice majority. And, I think if anyone wonders where the public stands, just look at what has happened across the country. when abortion has been on the ballot, we've won. And, turnout has been large all across the country. Since November of 2022, in every special election, all across the country, we've seen increased Democratic turnout, or increased pro-choice turnout in states like Ohio and Kansas, Virginia, Wisconsin, even Alabama. We saw a state legislative race swing right after the Supreme Court in Alabama took away the right to in vitro fertilization. We saw a state House race there swing by 30 points in a red district from a Republican state House member, and it flipped to Democratic, with 30-point swing just in a little over a year because of what's happened with reproductive freedom. Abortion is going to be on the ballot directly in many swing states across the country. They're going to have initiatives about abortion that will also drive turnout in critical states. And we know, again, that the American people are with us. And when we talk to voters, they also say that this is very much a bright line issue for them. They are not going to vote for someone who will not stand up for reproductive freedom, period. So we know it's been on the ballot all the way through. People have stood up and their voices have been strong. We know it's going to be a critical issue. And another kind of issue, another reason to highlight that is you've seen Republicans over and over now start to hide their records or start to talk about how they are kind of, someone said functionally pro-choice. I don't know what that means, but it's just not true. They have all voted for one of the most extreme speakers we've ever had in the House. They've voted for writers on bills to take away reproductive freedom. So the people don't believe that they are going to stand up for reproductive freedom. And we've seen just terrible stories across the country about the impact this has had on women's health care. So this is going to be it's been a critical issue. It is going to be a critical issue as we head into November as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It can only be 0 or 1. It can be somewhere in between. Absolutely. You're so right. Thank you. And I have another, this is also a tough question. The United States is the only developed country in the whole world that requires its overseas citizens to file the tax return both at home as well as in the countries where we reside. It causes so much difficulty for us as we try to open bank accounts, access retirement funds, and make financial investments for our futures. Can we count on you to work with us and support tax reforms that provide relief to Americans living abroad?
Thank you. And this is definitely in all of the conversations I've had with Democrats abroad, a consistent and important theme. So absolutely understand that. And, I just want to highlight next year is going to be a big tax year, no matter what. A lot of the provisions from the Republican tax bill in 2017 are going to expire. So another reason why it's critically important that we have the gavels as we head into next year, because I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, obviously a critical committee, because we are in charge of tax policy and making sure as we work through tax issues, both domestic issues and international issues, obviously address the issues that you're bringing up in terms of the impact on Democrats abroad, or just Americans abroad, but also talking about international taxes more broadly. The OECD and all the work happening there is going to be very, very important. So these are complex issues, not your specific issue, but it is going to be, these are going to be negotiated as part of a big package on tax policy. And so it's going to be very, very important that we are driving that conversation. I can tell you my colleague who serves with me on the Ways and Means Committee, Don Beyer, also a former ambassador, I know this has been something that he's been working on as well. So we will absolutely be in further discussions. The number one thing we are focused on right now is making sure that we take back the majority. So we have the gavel so that we are writing tax policy as we head into 2025. Because like I said, no matter what happens, it is going to be a big tax year, and really important that we're putting policy together that works for Americans, that's fair, and that provides that visibility, kind of long-term visibility going forward. So thanks for raising that. Absolutely am aware. And as I said, tax policy is going to be a big focus as we head into next year.
Thank you. Our next question is, Democrats abroad refers to our votes as the margin of victory in races up and down the ballot, including helping Washington State Secretary of State candidate Bob Ferguson win his race for Attorney General by a slim margin. It is estimated that there are hundreds of thousands of Pacific Northwest voters living all over the world, including a large number across the border in Canada. What would you like voters to know or keep in mind for this election?
Well, first of all, I think all of you said, understand what's at stake and how critical their vote is, how critically important that everyone uses their vote and their voice to make sure that they are building the future for our country, a future that we want, that we all feel we can thrive in. The consequences are great. The elections are going to be very, very close. We've had elections. We had a congressional election in Iowa where someone won by 6 votes. These are going to be close elections too in these swing districts. So every vote matters. We are going to work hard to turn out every single vote in our battleground districts all across the country. On the DCCC side, we have been working very, very hard to understand how to reach people wherever they are, to understand that not everyone's watching TV in the same way or is using digital ways to get information. And so we have been working very, very hard. In fact, made our biggest digital investments that we've ever made so we can get information to people wherever they are and highlight to them how important it is that they vote. I know the presidential has been working hard in swing districts across the country, but their focus is on swing states. If you look at the map for the House, it is everywhere. We have important races in New York and California, which will not be considered swing presidential states. We have key votes in the Northwest, as we were just talking about, also not the focus on the presidential side. But we also have opportunities to pick up seats in Alabama, in Iowa, in Nebraska, in Arizona, and in Wisconsin, just to give you the perspective of kind of where we play across the country. The House map is very broad. We're up every 2 years. We have a lot of races. And so it is really, really important that we turn out the vote everywhere because we have opportunities that sometimes overlap with the presidential or some of the Senate map, but in a lot of times we have races happening where there's not really a swing Senate or presidential investment happening. And so we're carrying that in the House. So I always want to remind folks, whether they think they're in a blue state where the presidential is strong in support of Vice President Harris, that they understand that we have swing congressional districts all throughout those areas too, and how important it is that you turn in your ballot and vote all the way down the ballot, whether it's governor's races, House races, local races, because President Harris, in order for us to move forward, needs a supportive Congress, and that's what we're working hard to do.
Thank you so very much for those reflections, Congresswoman DelBene, and for your tireless work and that of your staffs on behalf of your constituents and all Americans. And we thank you for being able to stay on a little bit longer to share with us a bit more coming up here. So thank you. And it is now my pleasure to invite Steve Nardi, the International Vice Chair of Democrats Abroad and former Chair of Democrats Abroad Canada, to share some remarks about the Canada cross-border strategy. Steve.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And hello, everyone, and thank you for making the time today to hear from these amazing candidates that we're going to be hearing from. I am formerly an Alaska resident and now a Michigan voter residing outside of Toronto, Canada. And I'd like to highlight a significant opportunity in this upcoming election: mobilizing border state voters living in Canada. With approximately 650,000 Americans eligible to vote outside the US, Canada stands out as a key opportunity, particularly for border states. Canada shares its border with many states: Alaska, Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. Notably, Democrats Abroad Canada represents 16% of the global membership of our border state voters. However, this is just a fraction of the eligible voters from these states residing abroad. In 2020, we saw a 57% increase in voter turnout in Canada compared to 2016. And that sounds great, but yet only 8% of eligible voters submitted a ballot. This indicates a vast untapped potential that we can leverage. During the 2020 election, Democrats Abroad Canada focused on southwestern Ontario, which has a significant population of US-born residents, many of whom are Michigan voters. This was a groundbreaking initiative featuring transit display ads, plus newspaper and radio ads, marking the first concerted effort to mobilize voters from a specific border state. Yet state parties remained unaware of this opportunity that was to their north. Fast forward to 2023, when Martha and I began a focused effort to shed light on the number of Americans in Canada and Mexico. From these efforts, we've seen a surge in awareness about the potential voter base throughout the party. This election cycle, Democrats Abroad and our Canada Country Committee are collaborating with state parties from border states to reach this overlooked pool of voters. And we're very thrilled that the DNC has funded a ground organizer to work in the Windsor-Essex area where we will launch our first traditional neighborhood canvassing effort. And the Michigan Democratic Party has provided our person with working space, so they've got a stable environment to work from. This initiative aims to engage both Americans to vote and Canadians who may know eligible voters. Additionally, Canada's leadership is strategizing with counterparts in Maine to connect with academics in the Atlantic provinces that are also Maine voters. Plus, they're exploring opportunities with New Hampshire. And more is happening out west, which you will hear about from our next speaker. The potential for increasing voter turnout in Canada is immense, and Americans in Canada can be the key to victory in close races. And for instance, there are more than twice as many voters from Florida in Democrats Abroad Canada than Al Gore lost Florida by. Every single vote matters. To help reach as many Americans as possible, I ask you to consider volunteering with your local chapter at their Get Out the Vote events, or participating in phone banking to encourage our members worldwide to request and submit their ballots. Follow Democrats Abroad and Democrats Abroad Canada on social media to amplify our Americans living in Canada can and must vote in this election messages. Or if you'd prefer to enable our digital ads to run in a few more cities, or keep those buses in Windsor on the road a few more weeks with that voting message, we would be very grateful for your financial support. So we all understand the stakes involved, and I'm asking you to help us. Let's harness this opportunity so that we can make a meaningful impact together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Having strong cross-border partnerships is such a powerful tool for our work. And our next speaker is also engaged along the Canadian border, Jennifer Phillips, who is chair of Democrats Abroad Canada, BC Mainland, and the chapter hosting this event today. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here and just chat a little bit about our regional expansion efforts. Our chapter just recently went through a renaming from Democrats Abroad Vancouver to BC Mainland. This is in an effort to provide more inclusivity to our already existing membership across the province. Vancouver alone is estimated to have over 150,000 US citizens in the metro area, making it the largest concentration of US voters outside of the United States. And as Steve mentioned, across British Columbia, there's at least 625,000. There's a massive impact to engage these voters, and we wanted to make sure that they felt supported and like they have a home here with our chapter. And I'm very excited that we're, now partnering with the Pacific Northwest state team to increase the cross-border engagement strategy. As Steve mentioned, that's been happening across Canada for a couple of years now. And, Mexico and Canada have such a unique opportunity to engage citizens abroad. So all good things happening over on the West Coast, and more to come, but we've already seen a great response to our name change, and we're continuing to try and find regional leads to engage people on the ground. We know that community events, in-person events are so important to build that sense of connection to one another and the US, and hopefully getting out the vote initiative. So I'm happy to be here and hear from the speakers today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Looking to the north, we have a message to share from Alaska Congresswoman Mary Peltola. Mary Peltola successfully delivered for Alaskans during her 2 years in office. After 30 years of delays, she worked with the delegation to secure the Willow Oil Project and good-paying jobs across the state. After 5 years of delays, she secured a ban on foreign trawled fish. She brought home more than $8.7 billion for state infrastructure and rural broadband, and hundreds of millions of dollars to renovate the rail belt energy grid and lower energy prices. Mary is dedicated to development, protecting fish, lowering energy prices, and building an Alaska where people can stay in Alaska, raise their kids in Alaska, and watch their grandkids grow up in Alaska. She is a lifelong Alaskan, a mother of 7, a grandmother of 2, and a fishing boat captain at the age of 14. She served in the Alaska State House for 10 years, championing education, public safety, and affordable energy. And she graciously recorded this video for us today.
Hello, and thank you for having me virtually today. Thank you to the Pacific Northwest team for Democrats Abroad. It's so important to have this new team turn out the international vote for Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington states. I'm honored to have the opportunity to share what my campaign has been up to this year. A little bit about me. I was born in Alaska and raised in rural Alaska on the Kuskokwim River in Gwich'luk, Tuntatuliak, Platinum, and Bethel. I'm Yupik and the first Alaska Native member of Congress. When I first ran for Congress 2 years ago, I ran on being pro-fish. Fish are integral to Alaskan way of life. If there's one thing I've always been, it's pro-fish. On the Kuskokwim, babies teethe on dried salmon strips. People eat salmon just about any way you can think of. Dried, smoked, jarred, grilled, baked, everything. Our way of life, our communities, just wouldn't be the same without our fisheries. When I started fishing commercially on the Kuskokwim River in the early 80s, for every spawning salmon, 6 would return. The reason for this decline are numerous: predatory industrial and foreign trawlers, ineffective management systems, a changing climate, and a lot more have played a role in this. One thing is clear: something has to change if we want to rehabilitate our fisheries. That change is what I fought for from day one in my time in office. Alongside being pro-fish, Alaskans are pro-choice, pro-family, pro-union, and pro-freedom. To put it simply, we want a future that Alaskans can depend on. I see a future where Alaskans can grow up in Alaska, raise their kids in Alaska, and watch their grandkids grow up in Alaska. Alaskans are pro-family and seek to provide for all of our loved ones and feel assured that our state will have opportunities for our children and grandchildren for years to come. That's why we've brought home more than $8.7 billion statewide in funding for rural broadband, ferries, ports, bridges, roads, airports, hospitals, and more. We need a strong education system, Social Security for all older Alaskans, less crime, less homelessness, affordable energy, housing, and food in every community. Alaskans are pro-freedom, and I'll always stand up for the right to choose, and I will fight against extremists who want to take our rights away. One of our most fundamental freedoms is the right for all workers to organize and join a union if they wish. I'm proud to be the first candidate of any party in Alaska to have support from 100% of the labor unions in our state. I'm proud to be one of only 5 members of Congress who voted to support railroad workers last year when they were fighting for sick leave and fair wages. Many people have asked me recently, what is at stake in this race? Losing this seat would mean losing our only Alaska Native voice, losing someone who understands our way of life, losing a pro-choice representative, losing someone who understands fish, and so much more. I refuse to let this happen, and I hope that you all agree. Let's continue this journey together, united in purpose and committed to making a difference. Voters abroad make up a disproportionate share of our electorate compared to most other states in the country. Your votes can make the difference between winning and losing. Thanks once again for having me, and please get out our voters abroad and get me over the finish line in November. Thank you very much.
So grateful for this message from Congresswoman Peltola. And I'd like to hand it back now to Congresswoman DelBene to give your final comments, please. And thank you so very much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And I just want to highlight how important Mary Peltola's race is. Not only is she an incredible voice for the people of Alaska and our first Alaska Native in Congress, she is also running in a very, very tough race. They are running lots of attack ads on her right now, flooding Alaska airwaves. And she's been an incredible leader. We are continuing to do all we can to fight back. This is a very expensive race. Just getting organizers around the state, because Alaska is so big, but there aren't roads to go everywhere. People need to take planes, et cetera. It is very expensive to get around to turn out the vote. So support for Mary is very, very critical, not only because she's such a strong voice, but also it is critically important to our majority. As I said earlier, we only need 4 more seats to take back the majority if we keep all the seats that we have. So this is tight. The numbers are tight up in Alaska, but I know Mary wins when we get out the vote and people know all the things she stands for and the incredible work she's doing. So just thank you for reminding folks how critical it is. Thank you for supporting her. And thank you for making sure that we turn out the vote across Alaska, but across all of the Northwest. This is an important time. We have a critical role to play, as I said, in terms of taking back the House. Right here in our region is so, so important. I know there are others here from the New Yorks and Californias and other places, which are also important, but our highlight right now is the Northwest, and we have a lot we can do there. So thank you for your partnership. Thank you for the work that you're doing to turn the vote. As we said, we have 35 days left. Governor Walz says we can sleep when we're dead. I kind of like to sleep. So I say, let's think about sleeping in November and let's do everything we can, because none of us want to have any regrets on election day or the day after election day about what more we could have done to help make sure we protect our rights, our freedoms, our democracy, and our future. So thank you so much for allowing me a few minutes with you today, and all the work that you are going to collectively do with us through November. And I'm looking forward to a great result and having those gavels in January.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here to inspire us and share your work with us. And now I would like to hand it over to Elise Hope. She's a Pacific Northwest team member, and she's also with BC Mainland Canada. So thank you. She will be introducing our next guest.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. As she mentioned, I'm Elise Hope. I'm the liaison for the Democrats Abroad, BC Mainland and Pacific Northwest state teams, and I am an Oregon-raised Washington voter living in Canada. As you've heard from Congresswoman DelBene and Congresswoman Peltola, state-level issues all have national importance. And it is my pleasure to support American voters from all over the country as a voting assistance officer with Vote from Abroad. It is also my pleasure to share some recorded remarks from Congressman Hakeem Jeffries about the national impact of Voices of Americans Abroad. Congressman Jeffries has served as the House Minority Leader and leader of the House Democratic Caucus since 2023 and represented New York's 8th Congressional District in the House of Representatives since 2013. He works to create more affordable housing, reform our broken criminal justice system, lower prescription drug prices, and ensure all Americans have access to a high-quality education. And he understands that it's important to hear the voices of Americans from his state living abroad.
Hello, this is House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries. If you are a registered voter and you live abroad, chances are you are still eligible to vote in November, and your vote counts. The right to vote is sacrosanct, yet extreme MAGA Republicans have decided that the only way to win elections is to engage in massive voter suppression. During the 2020 presidential election, there were an estimated 6.5 million voters living abroad, but only 14% voted. You can help us fight back against extreme MAGA Republicans who are determined to roll back the progress that has been made, suppress the right to vote, and jam Trump's extreme Project 2025 down the throats of the American people. Friends abroad, we will not let the extremists succeed in their effort to sow chaos and dysfunction. We will not allow them to win by infringing on your vote. With your help, we will take back the House, hold the Senate, and make sure that Kamala Harris becomes the 47th President of the United States of America. To everyone working to fight for our democracy, keep it up. Register at votefromabroad.org, and together we will win.
That was rousing. Thank you to future Speaker Jeffries for sharing that message with us today. We now have the opportunity to hear from candidate for Secretary of State Tobias Reed, who has been Oregon's state treasurer since 2017. Treasurer Reed is the only one in the race who has managed a state agency and has been an effective steward of Oregon's finances, managing assets of over $130 billion, including funds safeguarding Oregon's retirement, workers' compensation, and schools, and championing programs helping Oregon families save for education and job training through the Oregon College Savings Plan and Oregon Saves, a program that he sponsored and passed as a legislator. This first-of-its-kind retirement savings plan gives everyone the ability to save for the future and retire with security and dignity, even if their employer does not provide options. Treasurer Reed has earned a reputation for translating Oregonians' values and priorities into real-world results and is campaigning to be able to transfer this success into protecting voting rights. Treasurer Reed, over to you.
Thank you very much, Elise. I appreciate the way you introduced me and also the way you introduced future Speaker Jeffries. It's a good thing to think about. And I'm really excited to be with all of you, not only because of the content that we're talking about and how important all of these questions are, but because it feels really appropriate for me. I was born in Montana, raised in Idaho. Here I am in Oregon, and I went to business school in the University of Washington. So I feel like I got a stake in all of these Northwest states. But what I'd like to do just in a couple of minutes is give you a sense of why this race is important in Oregon. We are really fortunate, those of us who live in Oregon, to be in a place that has done so much work to make voting convenient. And I think it is a safe thing to assert that we are among the national leaders when it comes to elections that are safe and secure and inclusive. And we can't, as much as we want to celebrate and should celebrate those achievements, we cannot make the mistake of thinking that they are inevitable or invulnerable. And in fact, I was on a joint appearance last night with my Republican opponent who made it clear that he does not share this sort of value, the idea that we are stronger and more resilient and more capable when more people are participating in our processes. So people are thinking about the presidential election. They're thinking about their congressional elections, of course. And I want to make sure that people in Oregon and around the Northwest, everyone on this call, is not forgetting the statewide offices that are in front of us, because that's where a lot of decisions are also made and a lot of effects will be felt. So the Secretary of State in Oregon is responsible for elections, making sure that our system of mail-in voting is defended, that we are standing up to mis and disinformation being spread around Oregon and other places. And in addition to that, the Secretary of State in Oregon is the state auditor, with the responsibility of making sure that the taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently and effectively, that programs and agencies are doing what they're supposed to. So I really feel like this is a race and an office that needs stability and professionalism. While I've been state treasurer over the last nearly 8 years, we've had 4 different secretaries of state, and the turnover in that office, I think, has been a distraction from the critical work that Oregonians demand and need from the Secretary of State's office. So I'm excited about bringing the record that we built in the Treasury to the Secretary of State's office, and really excited to be part of the team that is here and that is going to do the work over the next several weeks. So my thanks to all of you for convening us, and thanks for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you so much, Treasurer Reed, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We are fortunate to be hearing from candidates on every level of our ballots in the Pacific Northwest today. Next, we welcome Alexis Mercedes Rinck, candidate for Seattle City Council Position 8. She has a reputation for bringing together people around solutions and making them happen. She has spent her life taking on the tough fights, championing regional agreements at the Sound Cities Association and King County Regional Homelessness Authority, organizing marches against the actions of the Trump administration, and educating communities about corporate money's influence in elections and policy. Having witnessed firsthand the impacts of incarceration, homelessness, and substance use disorder, Alexis fights for progressive change and housing equity because she knows what it is to struggle. A renter, transit rider, former restaurant worker, and multiracial woman, Alexis will bring important representation and an abundance of expertise to the City Council to assure that Seattle is affordable, safe, and welcoming for all. Candidate Rinck, thank you for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a minute since I've revisited that bio, but my name is Alexis Mercedes Rinck. As was said, I'm a renter actually in the Central District here in Seattle. I get to work on a bus. I actually don't own a car, so I have fully wedded myself to our transit system, which is why I want to push to make sure that we have expansive transit, so we make sure we're also meeting our climate goals and creating a safe commute for everybody on their way to work. But I went from waiting tables next to the Space Needle to working on policy at the UW Tower, and now I'm running for Seattle City Council to fight for a city that works for all of us and not just the ultra wealthy few. And I've done a lot of hard work bringing people together around solutions and making them happen. I got my master's degree at the UW Evans School of Public Policy. And since then, I've worked across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations on housing and health of our communities. I've brought together 5 cities under an interlocal agreement with unanimous votes to regionalize our response to homelessness. I developed a countywide plan, bringing together over 1,000 community members from cities, people with lived experience, service providers, and so on, to really unite around what we need to do to address homelessness. And most recently, I was working at the UW in the budgeting office as the Assistant Director of Policy Planning and State Operations. And I was brought to this work because of my upbringing. I am very proudly raised by my grandparents. That's due to the fact that I was born to teenagers who were caught in the cycles of gang violence, substance use disorder, homelessness, and prison. And they didn't get the support that they needed, but I got the chance to grow up in a resourced community in a proud union household. And I'm here today because of great public schools with teachers who saw me, protected me, and intervened when needed. And because of afternoons at the Boys and Girls Club. My birth dad is alive today because of a transitional housing program. We need to protect those investments. And that's why I'm in this race, to make sure that we fully fund our city services so we can keep our parks open, our libraries open, build the housing that we need, expand our transit system, and keep our communities safe. And division is everywhere. But this is the campaign that is uniting Seattle. We've actually united the entire local Democratic Party behind our campaign. Every single legislative district Democratic Party organization has endorsed this campaign. We've also united a number of incredible unions that represent frontline workers, from machinists like the ones that are on strike right now, electricians, childcare workers, long-term care workers, and nurses. They know that we will stand by and fight for working families. And we won the primary by 50%. We won 50% of the vote in the primary, which is tremendously exciting, and I think really speaks to who Seattle trusts will carry forward a vision for making the city more affordable, welcoming, and safe for everybody. And as a final note, I'm particularly excited to be here because I voted with Democrats abroad. I voted in the international primary. I believe it was 2016. In the primary, I voted from Chile. So I understand and know how important this organization is. And being able to have a voice while I was abroad meant the world, especially in 2016. So really honored to be here. I'll put my information in the chat if anybody has any questions they want to forward my way, but I will pass it back to the group and express my gratitude again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. A powerful voice for Americans voting from abroad as well. Thank you so much, Alexis, for talking about your important fight in Seattle, where I am proud to be a voter and to support unifying campaigns like yours. Though Americans abroad represent a coalition, we are also engaged voters in our individual states. And of course, no state is the same. The Democrats abroad state teams, like the Pacific Northwest state team, focus on supporting voters abroad using regional knowledge. I'd like to welcome Jennifer von Estorff, the Global State Teams Coordinator for Democrats Abroad, to tell us more about the state team's activities.
Thanks so much, Elise. I'm Jennifer von Estorff. I'm a Texas voter living in Germany, and I have the great pleasure of working with our amazing state teams. During the elections of 2020, we saw the importance of focusing on state-specific outreach, ensuring that votes from abroad were the margin of victory in the tightest races, both up and down the ballot. It was out of that momentum that the work of the DA state teams began, and we currently have 15 teams representing 21 states and over 70% of our DA membership. In our state focus work, we're really looking to bring the elections and the issues closer to you so that you know who and what is on the ballot, and so that leaders stateside know about issues unique to overseas voters. We also provide detailed voting information and voter assistance to help ensure that U.S. citizens living abroad can navigate the often complex rules and procedures to have their ballots returned on time and counted and make their voices heard. The potential for increasing the turnout of voters living abroad is vast, and it could shift the balance of power in the White House, the Capitol, and in your home states. The very fabric of our democracy depends on it. Who else do you know? Who can you help to vote from abroad, to sending them to votefromabroad.org, and by sharing our state-specific resources? Who can you share today's recording with to help motivate them to vote this year? In this vein, I'd like to thank our Pacific Northwest state team and the British Columbia mainland chapter for organizing today's Meet the Candidate event and for their partnership working together to bring out voters in this region. We also thank you, our attendees, for taking time to learn about the importance of these elections up and down the ballot. We encourage you to join a state team as a voter in one of our key states or as an ally. Please explore our work and our resources at the links in the chat and help us be the margin of victory in races across the country, all the way up and down the ballot. Thanks so much. Back over to you, Anne Marie.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So without Jennifer, we could absolutely not do what we're doing. And I would now like to come over to Idaho and introduce Kaylee Peterson, who is running for the 1st District U.S. Congress seat. And Kaylee Peterson comes from 6 generations of Idaho farmers. As a 34-year-old working-class mother of 2, she is on her 2nd run for the U.S. House of Representatives in Idaho's 1st Congressional District. As a sophomore, double majoring in criminal justice and political science, Kaylee stepped up to run in 2022 when more than 60% of the races in Idaho were left uncontested, and has spent the last 2.5 years campaigning across her 500-mile-long district, one of the reddest in the country. Using her background in advocacy for diverse youth in Idaho's foster and school systems, local political organizing, campaign management, and her 7 national titles in speech and debate, Kaylee has gained a reputation for rural outreach and successful organizing in traditionally conservative spaces. holding Republican town halls to reach disillusioned voters and build trust in progressive candidates and policies. She has built a statewide network of new candidates, volunteers, and campaign staff in an effort to flip the first district. Thank you, Kaylee, for being here. I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I am incredibly thrilled anytime I get the chance to talk about Idaho politics, especially at the federal and international level. Like you said, I stepped up to run in 2022. I've been running this campaign ever since. It was funny because I had always been involved in politics behind the scenes. I had always been a volunteer or an organizer or a campaign staffer. And whenever anyone would ask if I'd ever run for office, I always said, there's no way. No one wants some working class millennial mom to run for Congress. And when I found out 60 to 70% of the races in Idaho were running uncontested, I said, well, I can put my name on the ballot. But then I started hearing more and more about the realities of our political landscape in the first district. I think one of the first things I was told when I started to run is, listen, at the federal level in Idaho, there's no money, there's no support, there's no time. So you're on your own. And then I started traveling our massive district. And what I learned is where most people had written it off or saw something that was unwinnable, it was really just a massive opportunity that hadn't yet been organized. And when I talked to voters, I saw that they had lost faith because we have great candidates who step up. And then as soon as they lose, they vanish. And all the infrastructure and investment and everything that they built with them goes to. So as soon as I stepped up to run, I realized that what we really needed is a candidate who was committed not just to this race and to this seat, but committed to the district and building infrastructure, not at the grassroots level, but the state level, at the federal level, all together. And that's what we've done. And I think if you look at my opponent, then you can maybe why it's so easy to be committed to this race. I'm running against Representative Russ Fulcher, who's been a part of the Freedom Caucus ever since he was elected. It's frustrating when you're in kind of a forgotten district, when you see United States Congressman who takes pictures with insurrectionists from January 6th, who has not only argued against reproductive health for women, he just argued on the Supreme Court steps, arguing that pregnant patients should not be treated by emergency physicians. He has not only refused to comment on white supremacy and militant groups in our state, but then his voting record kind of speaks for itself. He hasn't brought $1 of earmarked funding into the state. He voted against veterans and firefighters. He's voted against climate action. He's voted against the Respect for Marriage Act, equality, IVF, contraception. And yet, largely, he is not held to account because we're in a district that doesn't get any coverage. So I think in a campaign like ours, we've realized we have to hit it from every angle, and that's exactly what we've done. At the grassroots level, I do a ton of rural outreach. I hold my Republican town halls where I go into some of the most conservative rural red spaces in our state, places like Riggins and Orfino and Sandpoint and Coeur d'Alene, and I ask Republican voters to question the Democrat. And what that's done is it's brought a huge variety of voters from independent and unaffiliated and Democrat and Republican into these town halls. And I tell them, tell me what worries you about the D next to my name. Tell me about the issues that you actually care about. And when we get right down to the policy itself, incredible how much we all have in common. Because the truth is, Idaho voters want the same things. They want economic stability. They want their children to have a quality education. They want the families to have access to health care and affordable health care. They want our veterans to be taken care of. They want Idaho's beautiful and vast landscape to be well managed. And so when we get down to the policy, it's been incredible how much kind of faith we've been able to restore in progressive candidates and progressive policies. But on the other hand, we can't do this alone. When I started in 2022, I would go into several of our counties and there was no one else. There were no local candidates. There was no local party infrastructure. So I spent 2023 going up and down the state along with the Idaho Democratic Party, recruiting candidates, volunteers, basically saying, if I can do it, you can do it, and you won't be doing this alone.
And this year, for the first time, Idaho has a local candidate in every legislative district. So we've started a Counties for Kaylee program, which is where we bring in candidates and volunteers and staff members and members of the community so we can all be working towards the same goal. We provide mentorship, resources, we provide any kind of support that they may need in rural kind of forgotten areas so that no organizer is left alone in Idaho again. And it's incredible to see the success of that program. But on the other hand, we also need to look at this from the national level. Idaho candidates, Idaho Democrats work with far less than candidates in most areas of the country. And they work without local media coverage. They work without resources and without a lot of infrastructure. So we've worked really hard to bring national attention and resources into the state. We work with groups like Vote Common Good, Vote Mama. We work with veterans groups. We even worked with Congressman Jamie Raskin and his Democracy Summer Fellowship, training and resources for students and campaign staffers. We've worked to get the endorsements of the AFL-CIO, the United Steelworkers, National Education Association. We're the first Democratic campaign at the federal level in this district to get the endorsement of the International Association of Firefighters. But we also work with dozens of other local unions trying to get and farmers and rural voters and progressives together working towards really common sense policy solutions for the state. So it's been incredible work that we've been able to do. We have so much further to go. I think from an international standpoint, just having attention brought into the issues, the races, and what our current United States Congressman has done in office is such an important step in the right direction as we continue to fight to flip this district.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. We're going to be hearing now from David Roth, and then we have a few questions for both of you. And David Roth grew up in Idaho, is raising his children 4 blocks from his childhood home. He spent his summers in Island Park, loves to camp and fish with his grandfather, has 2 sisters, and camping is very important to him, and the school and the career. Today he has 5 generations of his family living in Idaho Falls, and very important for him is building stronger communities and focusing on the issues of abortion rights, LGBTQ+, as well as the climate. And I would like to hand it over to you now, please.
Hi,
David, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I, like other people have mentioned, my bio is a little out of date there. So thank you so much for having me. I believe how important representation is all across the Northwest. Kaylee and I face very similar challenges. My district is 43,000 square miles. It is 18 people per square mile and 0.79, I believe it is, registered Democrats per square mile. So running a race in a state like Idaho has a lot of challenges that other states don't necessarily have to face. Predominantly, it's travel. We spend a tremendous amount of time and effort on travel. This is not my first race. In 2020, I stepped up to run for the state legislature in Idaho because, and as many political candidates, it happens, it was a specific issue that drew me to want to run, and that was our state was actually looking at eliminating all of the education standards and teacher certification requirements for our public schools, which, having spent most of my career in education, I felt was completely ridiculous. I stepped up to run, and we went through an entire process with training and talking about other candidates. And we talked about all the things that as a Democrat in Idaho, you never, ever want to talk about. You know, don't ever tell anyone you're a Democrat. Don't ever talk about abortion or immigration or climate change. And don't ever, ever talk about guns. Don't ever insult the Republicans. Don't ever complain about Donald Trump. Don't ever do all these things because they felt we needed these Republican votes. And at the end of the race, when I lost, as the we live in a red state, it happens. I really got back and thought that race at the end of the day meant nothing. If we're not going to talk about all of those issues and still going to lose anyway, then what is the point? What did it matter whether we ran or not? What did it matter whether or not we spent all this money or raised all this money? None of it mattered. And so right then and there, I decided that in the future, any campaign that I was going to be involved in, I was always going to focus on what is our win, even if we don't win. And I want to make sure that each and every one of those campaigns means something along the way, because as a political candidate or nominee, we have a tremendous amount of opportunity. Now, like Kaylee said, most of the candidates in our state were what we call run one and done. They run once, they have a horrific experience and feel very unsupported, and they never run again. And so one of my mentors here, a state legislator, he really pushed forward the idea that you have to keep going. So when 2022 came around and that filing deadline was fast approaching, I was getting text messages from him wondering why he wasn't seeing my filing yet. And I felt like a kid whose parents had sent him to medical school and said he didn't want to be a doctor. What my mentor, Steve Birch, didn't know was former Congressman Richard Stallings, who served this district in Idaho for 8 years, 4 terms, had reached out to me and said, we're not recruiting federal candidates, and there's a tremendous opportunity for federal candidates in our state to help build infrastructure, to help bring meaning to the campaigns. And he's like, I would love for you to run in a federal campaign. I think you've got the skills and the background, and I think that you can do it. And so I was thinking the congressional race. Well, he had in mind the Senate race. As was mentioned, most races in Idaho go uncontested in 2022. I actually had the only statewide contested race, and it was between myself and a person who lives in Boise. I live in Southeast Idaho. Almost all of these positions go to people who live in the Treasure Valley. We decided that we wanted our campaign to mean something if this was the only chance that we got. So we started fighting for LGBT rights. We started fighting for immigration and talking about the struggles that people who were on DACA face. We started talking about the struggles of our agricultural workers. We toured the work camps that are still in place in outside of Caldwell, where they honestly have not changed much in the last probably 60, 70 years. We started talking about healthcare, Social Security. We started talking about guns. Because I'm like, if this is the only chance that we have, it's what we're going to do. And we also started focusing on building infrastructure. The night of the primary election arrived, and I don't think anyone was more surprised than me that not only did we win the primary against a Boise millionaire who outspent us at least by double, we carried 41 of the 44 counties. And that really solidified in my mind that this idea of speaking to issues that are important to the people is actually where we should be in politics. And so we continued on in the Senate campaign to continue to push harder. We were the first and only statewide or multi-district candidate to support a ban on assault rifles. And I believe in this race, we still are the only ones that will publicly say that. We support immigration. On the day of the Dobbs decision, our campaign held the very first Dobbs decision protest in Idaho. We had a press conference. We had 150 protesters show up within hours of that decision coming out. It was the very first one in the state of Idaho. We were able to mobilize our volunteers across the state and really help to build infrastructure and push forward. One of the things that larger campaigns like ours can do is that we have resources that some of the other campaigns don't. So everybody who worked on my campaign, my Senate campaign, that didn't come back for this House race has actually gone on to work for other campaigns in the state. They took the lessons that they learned from us and they went and worked elsewhere. We also continue to act with this idea that we want to use the exposure, the network that we have in order to promote causes that are important to us. So fast forward to the House race where we are now. We're running in the 2nd district because we feel that every race needs to be challenged. Every election, there needs to be a contested race. And we had so much infrastructure. We have the largest email donor list in the state of Idaho, even larger than for a Democrat, even larger than our state parties. And we've been able to build that grassroots attention from across the state or across the country and bring those resources in. In the Senate campaign, our campaign was completely funded by grassroots donations. $25 was $27 was the average contribution. We had over 8,000 of them. And 86% of them came from people all across this country who felt that what we were doing in Idaho mattered. Along with donations, we still get letters from across the country talking about why what we're doing matters, that representation matters. So yes, we continue to focus in this race on abortion. And we say the word abortion because I don't want there to be shame associated with that word. I want to focus and use our messaging to point out that that's a valid medical choice. There's nothing to be ashamed of. So we continue to push to restore those Roe protections. LGBT rights. I was the first openly gay man ever nominated to the U.S. Senate from the state of Idaho. And as near as I can tell, I'm only the 2nd time it's happened in the history of our country. And so absolutely LGBT rights, we advocate. We use our campaign resources. We just have helped a trans supporting organization get through their 501c3 process because we understand that it's not just about our election, it's about building long-term infrastructure and community. We have the support. We are a gun sense candidate. Vote Common Good has endorsed us in every one of our races, or designated us. They don't actually do endorsements. We have the endorsement of Jamie Raskin's Free Thought Equality PAC, healthcare, protecting U.S. healthcare endorsements. And we just continue on to build that infrastructure because we're in this for the long haul. And as Kaylee said, we need to make those investments across our state. So supporting a campaign like mine may not seem like, I'm in an R+12 or R+15, depending on which chart you look at, district. It may not seem like it's a good investment, but it absolutely is because those investments yield dividends for years to come. So happy to answer any questions when we're done. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David and Kaylee. I just have to say, I saw an interview on the Midas Touch Network that Kaylee did, and I went, whoa, we really need to have this voice. And then I also looked up David's and I'm like, whoa, they're both so brave and you can inspire. I mean, it's inspirational for anybody to hear the stories that you're telling us and sharing and all the work you're doing. And thank you for expressing how you are reaching people in detail so other people can learn from that. I wanted to ask, what really surprised me is your entire state legislation is up for vote. And are people learning from what you're doing? And how do you see that? Is that getting optimistic? And Kaylee, go ahead, and then David, go ahead.
One of the most surprising parts about running this campaign is how quickly you build coalition. A lot of the times I go to these really rural areas across the district and you meet people who come to events because they want better policy. And this year I'm seeing those people run as candidates. And now when they struggle or they need support or advice, or they need somebody to come back them up at a rural event, they reach out. And so the coalition that we've built at the state level for state races, for Senate races, has just been remarkable. And it's one of the things people need to understand, because before at a federal level, we can't knock every door in a 500-mile long district. But now with local candidates and their staff and their volunteers, we're able to reach so many more voters who thought that they were also a blue dot, a red C. So I think this election, we're going to see a massive blue wave towards the state legislature.
That's really exciting. And David?
Yeah, I would agree. I've noticed since 2020, that there has been a tremendous shift in the way our state, the Democratic Party and Democrats in our state are looking at elections. And I think that people are starting to realize that we can't shy away from the things that make us Democrats. We need to be proud of those. We need to stand up for those. And so, I mean, a really good example that I could give would be in the Senate run, our original yard signs were sort of just like blue and you know, what you would expect from any Democratic candidate. And when the state, we were seeing HOAs all across the state banning pride flags in June. So we turned our political signs into rainbows because political signs are protected and they can't ban them. And I thought that there would be just a handful of people that would want them. They were the most popular signs. We gave out over 8,000 of them across the state. And we have the same situation this year. I think people want to be more visible. I think that that helps. And I think it is changing. And what you're seeing is as you have candidates who are being able to stand up and be visible, and a candidate like Kaylee or myself, we take a lot of the hits because we make ourselves big targets. And so it makes it easier for other candidates to speak up. And I do think it's changing, and people are recognizing that. In this last convention, in this last state convention, both Kaylee and I were actually elected as national delegates to go to Chicago. But something else happened as well. In the 2020 convention, I had run for a national delegate, and I had also run for national committee man, and we had multiple ballots, and I didn't even make it past the first ballot. In 2024, I was elected as a national delegate and national committee man to represent the state of Idaho on the very first ballot. So I do think that people are paying attention and like what they're hearing from campaigns like ours.
That's really, really wonderful. And then Suma, you have one last question for them. Please go ahead with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Kaylee and David, for taking time and speaking to us Democrats abroad. And I have this question. So what is your message for us Americans living abroad about the importance of both local and federal races?
At 6 years in office, voting against the interests of Americans living abroad. And this is somebody who's not held to account. The media isn't covering those votes. He's somebody that has a direct impact on whether or not we directly address climate change, whether or not we have common sense gun legislation, whether or not women have access to health care, whether or not we have tariffs coming in from goods abroad. So this is somebody who has a massive impact on the lives of Americans, both domestically and abroad. And so when we have these races, it's not just about trying to flip this district in this seat, but it's also about holding congressmen like Russ Fulcher accountable for the first time. And once more people start seeing the direct impact he has on legislation, he's the speaker pro tempore. He's really close to Mike Johnson. I mean, this is somebody who sits on natural resource and energy and commerce committees. And so I think that's what we have to recognize is the importance of the seat is not just about one candidate, but it's really about current Congress as well.
That's wonderful. We are so grateful that you both could be here today. We wish you super well in your races. And now I would like to give a quick introduction to AG Ferguson. Bob Ferguson. He has served as Washington's Attorney General since 2013 and earned a reputation for fighting back against unconstitutional policies during the Trump administration when he sued to safeguard clean water, abortion access, and worker protections. He has shared a video to talk about how important the votes of Americans abroad have been in Washington. Attorney General Bob Ferguson.
Hi everybody, I'm Bob Ferguson. I'm the Attorney General of Washington State. Hey, the first time I ran for office, if one voter in each precinct had changed their vote, I would have lost, and I would not be here talking to you today. So, like you, I appreciate the importance of every single individual vote. Heck, we had a governor's race not too long ago in Washington State that was literally decided by 133 votes for the entire state. And so that's why we're asking you to get involved. You can go to votefromabroad.org and get all the information you need. Even the seagulls in the background here want you to do it. So get out there and do it. And just really appreciate your getting involved and voting for the candidate of your choice here in 2024. Again, Bob Ferguson from Washington State. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you, Attorney General Bob Ferguson. And now, Elise, please bring us through for the parting words regarding voting.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Yes, Democrats Abroad is committed to getting out the vote through events like this and through our incredible Get Out the Vote resources, like everything that you will find on votefromabroad.org. It's great to hear support for voters abroad from Bob Ferguson, who's running for governor in my voting state of Washington. And his message is the same as mine. Go to votefromabroad.org as your one-stop shop for registering and requesting your ballot, finding information about your state deadlines and rules for returning your election materials, and getting one-on-one assistance from trained voting assistance officers like me. Today, I'm going to save our Pacific Northwest voters a step and share a quick roundup of what to keep in mind. First, if you have not already requested your ballot, go to votefromabroad.org today. If you have already requested your ballot, states must start sending out ballots 45 days before an upcoming federal election to anyone with a ballot request on file. So in 2024, overseas ballots started going out on September 21st. If you have not seen your ballot, be sure to check your email inboxes carefully, including your spam, or follow up with your local election official. And you can find their contact information through the votefromabroad.org state pages, which I will link to in the chat. Your ballot is your vote, so when you get it, be sure to fill it out and return it right away. You don't want your ballot to be rejected because you missed the deadline. So let's talk about deadlines. You can find all this information, as I said, on your Vote from Abroad state page. But Alaska voters, you can submit your registration by email or fax, but your registration deadline is soon, October 6th. If you ask to receive your ballot by email, which is a right of all Americans abroad, you will have the option to return your ballot by fax, which is faster than postal mail. For Idaho voters, your registration deadline is October 11th, and your ballot must be sent by mail. So get on that soon. Oregon voters, your registration deadline is October 15th, and you have many options for ballot return, including by email and fax. And Washington voters, you have time to make sure that all other Washington voters that you know abroad get their votes in. You have until November to register, and several options for ballot return, including email as well. But don't wait. And that's my message for everyone. Don't wait. Not on registration and not on voting. Vote as soon as you receive your ballot and return it by the fastest method available to you. And make sure that the other Americans in your life do the same thing using votefromabroad.org. And for some closing words, please welcome back our International Chair, Martha McDevitt-Pugh.
Thank you so much, Elise, and for everybody here today. I don't think there's anything I could add to that voting information that you just provided. So thank you so much for tailored information for all of our voters from the Pacific Northwest, and for being one of those people that has stepped up to assist voters, because now is the moment to start returning ballots. And we know that our voters have challenges doing that sometimes. So I'm really, really delighted that we are an organization that provides help to people no matter where they are in the world and no matter where they vote, to be able to get their ballot back and ensure that it's received and counted, which is so essential. So that is also a call to action for anybody who hasn't sent their ballot back or asked for it. You can get it sent to you by email. It'll be really quick, and be sure to turn it back as soon as possible. So thank you to everyone joined today. Thank you for the organizers, for Anna Marie, for moderating today, for Jennifer Van Estor for her huge commitment to voting down ballot in all of our states, to our executive committee members, Suma Shamana and Steve Nardi, who are both here today joining as well, and to Jennifer Phillips from British Columbia. Really delighted that we've been able to be here today to provide some information for our voters in the Pacific Northwest and to highlight some fantastic candidates. So thank you, everyone, and wishing you a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Martha. Thanks, everyone.